6 months, that's it. Not 6 years, not a lifetime, just 6 months of hard work, consistency, focus, and discipline. And your whole life could look completely different. But here's the truth. Most of us keep waiting for the perfect time, for January 1st, for Monday, for when we feel ready. Listen to me. You don't need perfect conditions, you need commitment. You give me 6 months where you wake up early, you cut the excuses, you stay locked in, and you put in the work every single day. And I promise you won't even recognize yourself. 6 months can rewrite your story, but only if you're willing to pay the price right now. When you really stop to think about it, 6 months isn't a long time. It's 2 school semesters. It's half a year of seasons changing. In the grand span of your life is barely a blink. And yet, if you commit yourself with real intensity, 6 months is enough to fundamentally reshape who you are, where you're going, and what you believe yourself to be capable of. People often underestimate the power of concentrated effort over a short, defined period. They overestimate what they can do in a week, cramming for exam, rushing to lose weight, or chasing quick results. But they underestimate what's possible when that effort is sustained consistently over 6 months. The truth is, transformation doesn't come from occasional bursts of energy. It comes from disciplined, repeated action compounded day after day. Think of it like this: every day you are engaged in a battle against entropy, against chaos, laziness, distraction, and despair. If you give in, if you drift without direction, life becomes heavier and more disordered. But if you stand firm, if you take each day seriously, you begin to carve structure out of the chaos. 6 months of deliberate structure, waking up with purpose, choosing to work instead of procrastinate, focusing on what truly matters, can shift the entire trajectory of your life. There's also a psychological principle at play here. When you prove to yourself that you can sustain disciplined action for 6 months, you fundamentally rewire your self-concept. You begin to see yourself not as someone who talks about change, but as someone who lives it. That identity shift is more valuable than the external results, because once you see yourself as capable of such transformation, the horizon of what becomes possible for you expands almost infinitely. 6 months is not about instant gratification. It's about planting seeds that will grow into forests. If you truly commit to 6 months of focus, those 6 months will echo through the rest of your life. The cost is high: sacrifice, discomfort, and a willingness to confront yourself honestly. But the reward is immeasurable. So the question you have to ask yourself is simple. Will the next 6 months be wasted in excuses or invested in becoming someone you'll be proud of? Because 6 months of real work can change your forever. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. Sometimes it's there in full force. Sometimes it vanishes without a trace. If you build your future on motivation alone, you're essentially gambling with your life. That's why consistency is infinitely more powerful. Consistency is the antidote to the volatility of human emotion. When you show up every day, whether you feel like it or not, you begin to transcend the emotional ups and downs that hold most people hostage. What people don't often realize is that consistency itself creates motivation. When you've stacked enough days of disciplined action, you begin to see results. Those results, however small at first, become evidence that your effort matters, and that evidence fuels momentum. Momentum is not born out of inspiration, it's born out of showing up when you don't want to. That's the paradox. Waiting to feel good before you act guarantees you'll never feel good for long. Acting consistently, despite how you feel, is what generates genuine confidence. There's also a deeper psychological truth here. Human beings are creatures of habit, and habits are forged through repetition, not through enthusiasm. Every time you follow through on what you said you do, whether it's going to the gym, writing for an hour, or studying your craft, you're strengthening the neural pathways that make that action easier the next time. Over 6 months, those pathways become highways. What was once difficult becomes second nature. This is how discipline transforms into identity. You no longer have to force yourself as much because you become the kind of person who simply does the work. But if you only act when you're motivated, you reinforce the opposite pattern: inconsistency, procrastination, and self-doubt. You teach yourself that your word isn't trustworthy, that you can't rely on yourself. That's a dangerous lesson to internalize because it breeds helplessness. So if you truly want to change, stop waiting to feel inspired. Anchor your life in routines and systems that don't care about your moods. Let consistency do the heavy lifting. 6 months of that will outperform 6 years of half-hearted effort fueled by fleeting motivation. Consistency is quiet, it's unglamorous, but it's unstoppable. And if you master it, you'll never again have to wonder whether you're capable. You'll already know. One of the hardest truths to accept is that you can't have everything at the same time. Every decision you make carries with it a cost, even if that cost is invisible in the moment. When you choose to spend your evening scrolling through your phone or drifting aimlessly from one distraction to another, you are, in effect, sacrificing your future. People like to believe that they can have comfort now and success later, that somehow the two can coexist. But history, psychology, and even basic economics show us otherwise. You cannot indulge endlessly in the present and expect to inherit a meaningful future. The law of sacrifice is unavoidable. When you decide to give something up in the present, sleeping in, partying, wasting hours on trivial entertainment, you're not losing those things, you're trading them. You're trading short-term pleasure for long-term strength. You're converting immediate gratification into future freedom. That's what sacrifice really is: a disciplined investment in yourself, in your potential, in the life you could be living 6 months from now. The ancient stories understood this. The idea of sacrifice sits at the foundation of nearly every tradition because people recognize that order, progress, and transformation require the willingness to delay gratification. The farmer sacrifices a portion of his harvest to plant seeds, trusting that tomorrow's reward will exceed today's comfort. The student sacrifices evenings of leisure to master knowledge, knowing it will equip them for decades to come. Sacrifice is not punishment, it's the recognition that what is of greatest value requires something in return. But here's where most people stumble: they want to celebrate before they've earned it. They want the rewards without the suffering that forges character. Yet the celebration means nothing if it isn't preceded by sacrifice. When you discipline yourself to say no now, you create the possibility of saying yes later, to freedom, to stability, to the life you actually desire instead of the one you drift into. So the choice is yours and it's unavoidable. Either you sacrifice now for your future or your future becomes a sacrifice. Because 6 months of saying no to what's easy will give you decades of saying yes to what truly matters. One of the reasons people fail to progress is because they scatter their energy across too many pursuits. They want to be healthier, wealthier, more respected, more skilled, more disciplined, all at once. And while these are worthy ambitions, pursuing them simultaneously often leads to mediocrity in all of them. Focus, by contrast, is about voluntarily narrowing your field of vision. It is about the conscious decision to eliminate the majority of possibilities so that you can succeed in one. That narrowing feels painful because it means saying no to other attractive options. But paradoxically, by saying no to most things, you gain the power to say yes to one thing fully. And it is that full commitment that generates breakthroughs. Think of light. Diffused, it illuminates a room. But concentrated, it becomes a laser capable of cutting through steel. Human potential works the same way. 6 months of scattered effort will yield nothing memorable, but 6 months of concentrated effort on a single craft, a single discipline, a single goal can change your trajectory entirely. It is not raw energy that produces transformation, it is directed energy. There's also a psychological principle embedded here. When you focus deeply on one pursuit, you begin to see patterns, connections, and nuances that are invisible to the casual observer. Depth produces insight, and insight produces mastery. Most people never reach that level because they dilute their attention across too many areas. They chase novelty instead of enduring the discomfort of focus. But mastery, whether in art, science, business, or personal growth, requires a kind of sustained obsession, a willingness to forego distractions so that you can drill down into the heart of one thing. The truth is, the world rewards depth more than it rewards breadth. The individuals who create real value, who break new ground, who command respect, are those who commit to going further than anyone else in one domain. That doesn't mean ignoring balance entirely, but it does mean understanding that balance without focus leads to stagnation. So if you want to see a breakthrough, stop dividing your attention. Pick one thing. Commit to it with the entirety of your being for 6 months. Because 6 months of absolute focus will achieve what 6 years of divided attention never could. Discipline is often misunderstood. People think of it as a kind of punishment, a restriction, or a set of rigid rules designed to strip life of joy. But in reality, discipline is the highest form of freedom. It is the recognition that your future is determined not by what you feel in the moment, but by what you choose in the moment. And more often than not, what is necessary is rarely what feels easy. Every one of us faces a daily conflict between two selves, the self that craves comfort and the self that demands growth. The first says, sleep a little longer, relax, you've earned it. The second whispers, get up, you have work to do, and the cost of neglect is too high. Discipline is choosing to side with the second voice not once, but repeatedly until it becomes instinct. It is the bridge that connects intention to reality, desire to outcome, vision to achievement. Without it, dreams remain fantasies. From a psychological perspective, discipline reshapes the structure of your character. When you resist the easy option, you train your mind to endure discomfort, and in doing so, you expand your capacity for responsibility. Responsibility is not a burden, it is the weight that gives life meaning. The people who thrive are those who shoulder more than they must, who voluntarily confront what is difficult because they understand that avoiding responsibility doesn't make it disappear. It simply shifts it onto someone else, or worse, onto your future self. 6 months of disciplined action can separate you from nearly everyone around you, not because you are more talented, but because most people refuse to do what is necessary. They chase shortcuts, they surrender to impulses, they let emotions dictate their actions. But discipline is impartial, it rewards those who honor it and punishes those who ignore it. The truth is simple, but difficult to live out. You don't get to the life you want by doing what is easy. You get there by doing what is necessary. And if you can embrace 6 months of that kind of discipline, you'll discover that the person you become in the process is capable of far more than you ever imagined. What's remarkable about 6 months of concentrated effort is not only the results you achieve, but the person you become in the process. Too often we think of change in purely external terms: more money, better health, a new career, a different environment. But the deeper transformation is internal. 6 months of discipline, focus, and sacrifice does something far more profound and alters your identity. It convinces you in the most undeniable way that you are capable of far more than you once believed. The person who begins those 6 months is not the same person who finishes them. At the start, you carry with you doubt, hesitation, maybe even a history of broken promises to yourself. But when you endure the discomfort, when you keep showing up day after day, something fundamental shifts. You begin to trust yourself again. That trust is the foundation of confidence, and confidence is the foundation of freedom. Because once you know you can change yourself, you no longer wait for circumstances to change. You become the change. Psychologically, this is critical. Human beings live within narratives. We all tell ourselves a story about who we are and what we are capable of. For many, that story is small, defeated, constrained by fear or past failures. But 6 months of genuine effort has the power to rewrite the narrative entirely. It provides evidence, and evidence is stronger than hope. Evidence tells you, I did this, I became this, and therefore I can become more. That shift in narrative is not temporary. It reshapes your trajectory for years, even decades to come. Think about the weight of that. 6 months, just half a year of your life, can create momentum that carries into the rest of your lifetime. And yet most people never give themselves the chance because they underestimate the compounding power of time and consistency. They delay, they procrastinate, they waste the months, and in doing so, they waste the years. So the real question is not whether 6 months can change your life. It can. The question is whether you're willing to begin. At the end of the day, the truth is simple. 6 months of your life is not too much to give, but it is enough to change everything. 6 months of hard work, consistency, sacrifice, focus, and discipline will not only produce results, it will transform where you are at the deepest level. You don't need another year of excuses, another cycle of waiting for the perfect time. You need a decision. Because if you give yourself fully to the next 6 months, you will look back and realize that this short stretch of time became the turning point. The line where your old life ended and your new life began. So the choice is in your hands: waste the months and stay the same, or seize them and step into the person you are always capable of becoming. 6 months can change your forever, but only if you start now.